Alright, here we are. We are back. What's going on, you all? I'm Brandon. I'm a guy who flies, here with episode 4 of The Flight Attendant, HBOmax's new hit series. Let's get into it.
Fly. Hey player, what you gonna get for Christmas? Yeah. What you gonna get that for? Come on. What you gonna...
So, the episode opens where we left off, with Cassie and Shane on the train on the way back home from Dead Alex and 3C's memorial service. Remember, I told you all, when Cassie was looking for the bar cart, she ran into the lady in black, which we found out is actually Miranda Croft. So Cassie tries to run away. Miranda starts chasing her, but Cassie does end up running into the police, which scares Miranda, so Miranda hops off the train at the next station. So, of course, Cassie is paranoid. She's not going to go back home right away because, obviously, Miranda was the person who went through her apartment. She knows this now. So she goes to Annie's house. However, Annie is reluctant to let her in. Doesn't quite really believe her right away from the very beginning. However, she does eventually say some things that makes it... she tells her that she knows who Miranda is and that she saw her, and that convinces Annie to let her in. Mind you, remember, she has the bag of shredded reports from the office of the Zokolov house from the memorial service. So she's in there. She's telling Annie what's kind of happened. Annie's talking back and forth with her, and then she's like, "Look, we should put the shreds together and see if that will lead us into some direction about what they were hiding about Alex and his potential involvement in something." So boyfriend, not boyfriend, he begins to help Cassie put together the shreds to see if they can bring back some resemblance of the original documents. And so they spend all night doing that and analyzing them in the morning. And they could basically come up with this flight plan that is this flight from New Jersey to Maine, I believe, on a private jet that basically does a turn. It just goes up there and then it turns around and it comes back. And so she basically gets the name of the company, and she decides that getting on that flight through conversation with Alex in her head, possibly, even though I think he tries to talk her out of it, and we all would think that that's not a good idea to further involve yourself in this case. But anyway, this is our girl, you know, Cassie. She decides to try to figure out a way to get herself on that flight. She has a conversation with her brother because he's just kind of confirming, like, "Hey, we're going to meet at your place tomorrow morning." She's like, "No, actually, no, that's not a good place to meet at. It was just broken in." He thinks she's lying because he sees her as this compulsive liar who's, you know, unpredictable and non-trustworthy, but she's like, "I'm actually telling the truth." So they make plans to meet at the aquarium and 12 instead. Okay, so she calls Megan to get more information about how she might be able to get on that flight, and Megan basically tells her about Nate, who was the pilot that they work with quite often, because for this large international airline, somehow these same crews end up together. Well, some of them buddy bid, but even weirder that always happens. But anyway, she calls Megan, and Megan tells her that Nate flies that right often to make extra money to cover gambling and other debts. And we see Megan in the mall with her son while she's talking to Cassie, and she sees the man that she had done the deal with, and I'm assuming they make eye contact to exchange something. So basically, he drops off a package for her that she takes. We later see her go home with it, and there's money in that package. So I guess that's the payment for her services for stealing that information off her husband's computer. Cassie calls Nate to try to, you know, get some pull to get her on the flight, and she offers... First, you know, she's trying to make it worth his while, and he thinks she's talking about, you know, physical favors, and she's like, "No, money. I know you have gambling debts." And so he's like, "Yeah, we basically get to make our own flight crews," which, y'all do that in the private world? Because I'm sitting at home until April on semi-paid leave, so if there's any, you know, charter and or private jet people out there, and you need a flight attendant, you can hit me up. I'll be there. And then we can do what we need to do. But hit your boy up. So we knew that Annie was really stressing because she was going to get in trouble. So we see her back at work, and yes, she does get in trouble because she crossed a line that should not have been crossed. And basically, by calling in a favor from some of her clients, she's now put herself in a position where they're probably going to call her and ask her to do something that is probably so bad her boss doesn't even want to know what it is. But yeah, that's the situation that she's kind of been left in. Cassie does make it to the aquarium, although a little bit late, and she drinks. I don't know if it's like, it's the nervousness or just the thought of being around her brother that causes her to drink, but I'm like, why drink at noon right before you're meeting your brother, his husband, and your nieces when you know he already has a gripe about your drinking? I'm like, I don't get that part, but hashtag alcoholism. But she drinks and then tries to wash it down with mouthwash, and that never works. That just makes you even more guilty. Anyway, we get to see this day of her having a nice montage of family time, you know, spending time with her nieces, and things are actually going semi-well. There's a little snag when the nieces see toys, because there's always a toy at an aquarium or a zoo or something, and the parent, their brother and his husband are like, no, we're trying to teach them that just because you see everything does not mean you necessarily need it. The purpose of today was to be here to spend time with each other, because Cassie offered to purchase it. And so they basically said no, and that was kind of the end of that. And then when Cassie was on the phone with Megan, the girls kind of got away. She had to hunt them down. She was like freaking out because she thought them lost it. So she kind of yelled at them and berated them. And, you know, that kind of took down the morale a little bit because, you know, she just yelled at them. And so she in turns buys the two whales and then gives them to the girls secretly and say, hey, this is just our secret. I want you all to have these. There's that. And don't ever do that, because the parents will always find out, especially when, I think my brother's name is David. Davey or David. When you have a brother like him, they're going to find out, okay? But they end up with that. They have plans for dinner later on that evening, and she's trying to work this 3 o'clock flight in between them leaving the aquarium and the zoo. She shows up like late. I'm like, girl, you're the only flight attendant. If he says Will's up at 3, why are you late? Like, she is always late. However, she shows up. She's like, what do you need me to do? And he's like, well, everyone on the manifest is here, so do your pre-flight checks and then we'll be ready to go. She looks back, the cabin is empty. He's like, I see the 8 passengers back there, do you? And then he, you know, motions to the captain, and the captain's like, yeah, I see all 8 passengers back there. I said, looks like we're ready. And so she quickly realizes that they're getting paid really, really good money to not ruffle any feathers. He's like, yeah, and if the FAA agent were to ask you, you also saw all 8 passengers on the flight. And so she's quickly like, okay, something isn't up here. Like, this is some of that mixy business that was probably going on that Alex was involved with Miranda. She works a flight while they're in flight, because obviously she has nothing to do. She has this little moment with Alex in her head, and they end up talking, and there's this moment where she basically says, I'm not falling in love with you, which means she's definitely like falling in love with you. And let's rewind, because I've already called that, and I said an episode or 2 ago that they had a thing. You could tell the connection was genuine between them, and it is very evident every time that they're together or whenever she thinks of him. Well, most of the time. Anyway, while they're in flight, Miranda Croft goes back to what I'm assuming is her apartment here in New York or wherever she's staying. There's a man in there that scares the shit out of her, that he's sitting there. And that man is Victor. Okay, we heard Victor's name yesterday when we were at the Zokolov home. I hope I'm saying that name right, but when we was at Dad, Alex, and 3C's parents' house, I'm assuming, we heard that name. Basically, he paid her to handle the Bangkok job, which I'm assuming was killing Alex. But as we all know, there was another missing link in there, that piece, and that is our girl, Cassie, where Miranda messed up. She messed up in that regard, and that's what she's been trying to clean up. However, Victor has kind of already fed up with it. He's like, I've already made a contingency plan. You're off this. You're done. You need to pack up and go back to England. And he tells her not to make this one of the things that she obsesses over. So I'm just out here assuming that she's probably the type of person that's like, when she gets a job, she like obsesses about it and she wants to get it done, and she will stop at nothing to get it done, even if that puts her in some risky, about to get caught situations. Like chasing this girl out in public on the train. Victor wants to know whether or not Cassie has his stuff. Don't know what said stuff is yet. However, Miranda doesn't know either. And so that is going to be a QT&A. So they land in Maine and they're in a hangar, and Cassie looks out the window and she sees just cargo of black crates being taken off the plane. So she's thinking like, oh, must be the reason why they're smuggling something. So then her and Nate have some interaction, and he's like, yeah, we're just paid to not know anything, not pay attention, and just to do what we do. She pays him for getting her on, and then he leaves, and of course, what does she do other than go down there to open the crates? And he walks up on her before she can really figure out what it actually is. So when she gets on the plane, she looks it up on her phone, and they are missiles, or rocket launchers. Missiles, rocket launchers, something in that realm. Either way, she tries to call Annie and tell her, but the connection is just horrible, so that ends that. So next we see Cassie. She is at a restaurant waiting on her brother for dinner. Of course, she's having a drink, but it looks like she's had 2, possibly more. The brother comes in and immediately confronts her with the stuffed animal whales that, as I told you, he found in the girl's backpack, and wasn't more so upset about her giving them to her. It was the telling the girls to basically keep it a secret and lie to their parents. That was the part that was more distressing in it. He's paralleling or comparing so many of Cassie's actions to the actions of their father, and you can quickly learn that her brother, has a very, very rocky relationship, or had a very rocky relationship with their father growing up. And based on what we've seen in Cassie's flashbacks, her experience has been a little bit different. The way her brother tells it, because they basically get into a heated argument that actually sounded like it really needed to happen, okay? But they get in a very, very heated argument about how, you know, it was always Cassie and their dad, and he would refer to her and tell her things like she was a son he wishes he had, or he should have had, and he just did things that was just very rude to the son, and just like super mean, and just put her up on this pedestal. And Cassie and the father kind of had their own secret language, and they went out and did their own things, just kind of void the son. And so it was a rift there, and she claims that she doesn't remember that type of treatment towards her brother. And the brother is basically saying, like, when are you going to wake up and stop only seeing what you want to see, and wake up and acknowledge the truth about who our father was and what that experience was like. And so then we get a whole, like, extended, vivid, like, flashback scene to them. It was the sister and the brother. They were participating in some type of, I guess, egg race at a rec center at a school, egg on a spoon race. And next thing you know, you see the father coming up beside her, championing her to get to the finish line. And then he, like, reaches over and just pushes the son, tells him to just let your sister win. And then she wins, and then she, like, turns back to see the scene. We're looking through the perspective of young Cassie, but this is, like, older Cassie acknowledging what really happened. And you see the drunk father stumbling out, knocking over other kids, falling into tables, and Cassie is just, like, in denial, like, no, that's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. And you're quickly beginning to realize the effects that the alcohol has, and just clouding her vision, clouding her memory, and her understanding of what happens. And so the brother, like, just leaves in an uproar, like this is, you're not good, this is not good, and he just up and leaves. She begins to hyperventilate a little bit, and the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm just thinking, like, my God, girl, like, you need some therapy. Like, Annie offered earlier in the episode to, like, hey, I think you're experiencing PTSD. Like, you can talk to me about other things other than, you know, you chasing down behind some woman or whatever. You can talk to me. But she's like, no, it's too much, because she's thinking about just all the stuff from the very beginning of time. And I'm like, oh my God, if this is not a clearer sign of somebody who needs to get out of their head and talk to somebody else, it is. Like, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it, but I am so pro therapy. Therapy has helped me in my life. And my God, would I not recommend that Cassie go talk to somebody. But she calls Annie. Annie's out at dinner or on a date or whatever. Her phone's in her bag, so she misses her call. And then she tries to call Shane. Shane is out at dinner at a restaurant. And so he ignores the call. and she has nobody else to really turn to. It's like she's been isolated from her family. She's going through such a tumultuous event, and it's like she's kind of truthful with the people she has in her pocket, but everybody kind of knows that she's also lying to them at several points as well, and so nobody quite trusts her. Definitely not her brother. And it's just a mess. So she just like breaks down. So next thing we see her do is show up at Buckley's apartment. They do what adults do. They go and have sex. She gets herself together afterwards and goes and make herself a drink because clearly she's drinking. Her and Alex in her head have an entire moment of him being slightly jealous. Well, her calling him jealous and him saying like, no, you're just drinking to avoid the issue and figuring out what happened to me. And then they start making another plan because they make all these plans in her head, and they decide that she should go talk to Sabrina now that she knows more about Miranda. Sabrina might help her. Let me pause to say that we got a scene earlier in the episode where Sabrina was in her apartment, knocking the door. It's Miranda. Miranda pushes herself in like, we need to talk. That happened. Fast forward to the dinner scene with Cassie and her brother. Fast forward to her sleeping with Buckley. Fast forward to her now going to Sabrina's apartment. She gets there, banging on the door, and she hears commotion in the inside. She hears the talking. She hears her say Miranda. But she can't get in because the door is locked. And so she like runs out the apartment, tries to call 911 to like file a report about potential abuse. Next thing you know, we hear a yell. We see a body fall from the sky, smack to the ground, look back, bam, it's Sabrina. And that's how the episode ended. Yeah, it was quite a bit. But, you know, it is what it is. We are just pushing through the flight attendant. She is always at the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing in the wrong place at the wrong time. But yes, we will continue to be watching. We are halfway through. This was sort of like our mid-season finale. Like, my gosh. Anyway, what are our questions that need answered this episode? Okay, what is Victor's stuff that he wonders whether or not Cassie has? Question number 2. How will Cassie's relationship with her brother be healed? How will that get healed? And question number 3. Do you all think that Cassie will actually sit down and ever talk to somebody about everything that's going on in her life? All of the past and present stresses and traumas that she has experienced. There was no flight attendant content in this episode, so I don't even have a question about her rollerboard this episode. But that was my recap of episode 4 of The Flight Attendant. Again, I'm Brandon, I'm a guy who flies, and I'll see you all the next time.